Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Woke Blokes podcast. Ryan Hassan here from the Centre for Healing, joined as always by Nick Sutherland from Myndfit. Nico, how are you?
I'm good.
10 push-ups.
Yeah.
More exercise.
It's time to get down and do the push-ups, Nick. Do it now.
That was really good. We had professional impersonator. That was a really good Arnie.
I know. I mindfully said good then because I do need to do more push-ups. So I just threw myself under the bus.
For those who don't know, that's a bit of your army background, isn't it, Nick? If you have a client who mindlessly answers how you're going and just says good like on autopilot, then 10 push-ups is the punishment.
Yeah, well, good's not a feeling. It's very. I can't really work with good, and we've spoken about it many times before. I am genuinely interested to learn how a person is feeling when they come in for a session. So I had a great example the other day. Dude came in and just said good, did his push-ups, and then got the pillow with the wheel of emotions on it, and sat there and he said, I feel disgust and sad, and I'm like, wow, wonderful. And the session just evolved from that. And he left going, fuck, that was a good session. And I'm like, it's because you gave us something to work with at the start of it. So
got very real, just was actually open
real
and
quickly
honest.
as well.
Yeah.
We don't have to faff about and we just get, right, how are you feeling, mate? Yeah, I'm feeling this. Okay. Is that a healthy emotional response to whatever it is that you're experiencing in life? Is this necessary or unnecessary suffering? No, it's unnecessary. Okay, well, what's led to that? And then we figured out that he was working way too much, so he was out of balance. He'd neglected stuff, and he was drinking, and then so he's at this end of the spectrum, and then he's just taken a few days off and just been watching Netflix and eating crap food. So cause and effect, and we reflected it to him, and he left with a plan and feeling motivated and getting back in balance. So
excellent. It all started off with being just honest with our emotional state.
That's but helping him to identify what he was feeling as well.
Well, you've got that aspect of it kind of being an automatic social response too, and so you're sending a bit of a different message. Often when we go through a day, we're not exactly being authentic and present. And when you sort of say, when you reel off good, it's just one of those social norms, and you're not actually being present. You're not feeling your internal environment.
It's also a fairly apt response to give out there because people aren't genuinely asking you how are you feeling. It's basically them saying hello now. So you can't genuinely reply. I think a non-genuine question gets a non-genuine answer. Because
you can try. You just might get some glazing over. Try it next time.
Oh, here he goes. Here he goes again.
How you doing today?
Drama queen.
Well, it's been interesting. I've been having some uncomfortable sensations. I don't know if there's a cold coming on, or might not be the best thing to say during COVID
either. Hey, Hass, who's that speaking? Whose voice is that?
Well, this is our special guest today, Dan MacLean, John McLean from Die Hard's brother, apparently.
Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonator.
I know, a man of talents that I didn't know, and I'm excited to explore them more. Nick, can you tell the listeners who Dan is, and why you've had him on today? You don't know. Dan, who are you really?
I better jump. Wow! Cutting straight to the chase. Who am I really? It's the Advaita Vedanta.
I sat on the
inquiry question. Who are you? Just dwell with it.
I sat on a panel the
Who are you?
For a mental health summit, and there's 4 of us on there, and I was like, all right, let's just start off with who are you? And I dived straight into, well, I am just the conscious awareness of my thoughts and feelings, just to take the piss, and then I jumped out of it, and they had a chuckle, but one dude thought I was actually being really serious. He's like, oh, we're getting a bit too heavy. I'm like, no, we're not. We're not getting heavy. It was a deliberate for it. Dan is a friend of a client of mine, and I think these two were chatting sometime few months ago, and got to talk about Myndfit, I think, and I think it piqued Dan's interest, or there seemed to be a good synergy, and then so Dan and I ended up having a chat, and yeah, it just really clicked. And similar to you and I, Hass, and Shane and I, and so yeah, Dan and I have been chatting weekly about the Myndfit methodology, and I've sort of been imparting on him the way that we work here, and there's potential for Dan in the future to maybe work under the Myndfit umbrella, sort of just letting things happen very organically and still exploring what's going on. But I love the cut of his jib. I love the way his mind works, and what he's studied. He's got very philosophical in the way that he thinks and lives, and I just thought he'd be an amazing mind to explore on the podcast. So I wanted to get Hass a meeting of these two minds.
Well, I felt we're meeting in the middle of my screen on Zoom at the minute.
Oh, yeah.
My mind's already blown by the Arnie impersonation. I've heard that many shit Arnie impersonations in my life, including my own, and that was just
and mine. And mine. Is that something you've worked on, Dan, or did it come naturally, or?
Oh, when I was a boy, we always hung out and we watched Commando. And I said, "You need to do it. You got to do it properly. You need to listen and pay attention." Nick, stop laughing, Ryan.
It's so good.
Joke.
It's so good.
Do you guys remember? Just as a tangent, do you guys remember Commando? The bad guy Bennett in Commando. He was an Aussie. You might not have realised.
Yeah. I remember from that movie the end, and him and Bennett are having the big battle at the end. And then there's some classic one-liners in that movie, but like the one where he's holding the baddie off the cliff and then just gets the information and drops him, and the girl's like, "What did you do with him?" He's like, "I let him go."
Yeah.
And anyway, at the end, he impales Bennett with this, pipe.
Steamy pipe.
Yeah, but look, where's this steam coming from? Steam's coming off, and he's like, "Let off some steam, Bennett."
Totally. No, that's pretty good, Ryan. I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
Okay.
Rocking some Arnie there.
Some Arnie validation.
Yeah.
So, Dan, you are, clearly we were talking before we pressed record and before Nick jumped on, and I was asking how long you'd been in Canada, because you're living over there in beautiful Canada on the other side of the world, and you said 16 years, and I was saying how your accent hasn't really picked up any Canadian. It's stayed very, very Aussie.
Yeah. Yep. It's I don't know, it's interesting. Some people seem to lose it and other people don't. I'm certainly in touch with my family a lot, so I get that Aussie infusion, very close with my family. But I guess I don't feel self-conscious at all. I've certainly changed a few words. Like if you come over and you say, "Where's the toilet?" Everybody kind of look at you like, oh my God.
Really?
What did he say? Where's the toilet? So you say washroom. That's one of the things. And you can't say chuck it in your ute. Nobody knows what you're talking about. It's a truck. And then a big truck's a semi, of course.
Right.
So there's those cultural words which I've compromised on.
So you can't say I'm going to the shitter. That's not going to work.
Yeah, you could rock it. You might get a few shocked impressions.
I think if they're shocked by toilet, they're going to be shocked by shitter.
Where's the dunny?
The dunny.
Dunny. I wouldn't know.
Thunderbox.
Thunderbox. I like that one myself.
Thunderbox.
It's funny, when I travelled, I lived in England for 2.5 years, and I came back after 1 year from my sister's wedding, and I came back with a thicker Australian accent because I was really trying to bloody hold on to it. So I came back sounding a bit like a redneck. And then the second time I came back, because I was working in these pubs called the Walkabout, and there was a lot of Antipodeans there. So there was Kiwis, Aussies, and South Africans. And I came back with a heavy Kiwi accent. So
interesting.
I was like, sure, bro. Yeah, you go. No choice. Yeah, nice. Yeah, it was just someone's like, "Have you been to New Zealand?" I'm like, "No," but yeah, it was interesting to see how you do get affected by these things.
I reckon as well, if you go somewhere when you're young as well, and you know, the girls are like, oh, I love your Aussie accent, then you go harder with it too. Like, you're definitely not going to lose it if there's a chance of getting some girls.
Oh, my Aussie
Yeah.
accent. Ah, geez, right.
What are you talking about, love?
What Aussie accent? What are you talking about?
Come
I
on,
don't have an
chuck a
Aussie
strip on
accent,
the
don't
barbie
you?
and crack
Oh.
a can and rip the lid off a few and see what goes down there.
Yeah, totally.
Oh,
I remember mates talking about that when I was younger too. And your gap year, yeah, rock that Aussie accent hard.
Okay,
Go to
rock
UK.
hard. So Dan, tell us a bit of. Oh, Nick, did you have a story to tell? I forgot that you were going to.
Yeah. Well, so interesting experience, I guess it was. I did Em told me that I've been snoring and holding my breath a bit at night. And so I went to the local sleep clinic and got all the bells and whistles to go home and do an at-home sleep study. So I wired myself up, and they send the report off to a GP. Now, I work in Mornington, but my GP is in Frankston, which is 15 minutes down the road. And so I go to my GP for all my sort of army stuff and whatnot, but I've got a local GP here just for stuff I don't really need to have a history of. So I just got him to send it to Mornington GP, and I went in there to get the results, and he's like, all right, well, there's a bit of mild sleep apnea and mild snoring. I'm like, okay. And it's got recommendations. It's got 3 lines, and the first one was a very generic line. It was reduce alcohol intake, increase exercise, and improve sleep hygiene. Now that's 3 things that applies to everybody. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But this doctor, he stopped at the first bit and he said, all right, so what's your alcohol intake? And I said, oh, yesterday I had sort of half a dozen beers and a bottle of wine. I finished off with a whiskey. And he's like, oh, that's not what we advise. We advise only 2 standard drinks per day with some alcohol-free days thrown in there. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. And he's like, so, why were you drinking that much? I'm like, oh, it was a bit of a heavy day. It was Anzac Day, ex-army. It's a bit of a, but the footy was also on. I'm an Essendon supporter, so it's a big day, and just mixed emotions. Oh, all right. So have you got anyway? He goes, I want to do an anxiety and depression test on you, and I just went, oh, how interesting. I was like, I can't wait to go down this rabbit hole and see where we end up. I had no expectations. I kept an open mind. And within 10 minutes, he was trying to get me on antidepressants.
Mm.
What?
And I said to him, I appreciate, where you're coming from, but I'm not taking any medication. And he said, well, if you're not going to take my help, he goes, I think you might need to find another doctor. He fired me. And I went, you don't fire me. I fire you, pal.
Unbelievable.
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
That is
unbelievable.
unbelievable.
So he didn't ask anything about my current life situation. He didn't ask about work. He didn't know that, we just moved in sort of in the last 6 months into a new house with a partner and had 2 kids, and work's all up in the air, and not up in the air, but Shane's sort of stuff's going on, and he didn't ask any. There's no context for any of this. It was just medicate, and I was like, you're part of that.
Medicate or get out. It's interesting as well, because I think what happens when people are in our line of work, and people who listen to the show we're very honest with our emotional states and what's going on. When you get doctors and people in that system where things are kind of a checkbox kind of thing for people that are at risk, when you've got people who are honest, because here's an example. When Tommy was born and we had these maternal health care visits, and so we'd have to go and they'd weigh him and measure him and make sure he's growing correctly and that kind of shit. And I went with Mel, and they asked her. The lady asked her some questions, and about it's to do with postnatal depression. And here's the thing: like Mel's, she definitely did not have postnatal depression. If anyone did, I did, but she didn't. but me and Mel, like, are super honest with this stuff because Dan, Mel, my partner's a therapist as well. And so she went through, this lady just went through a questionnaire, and Mel was just completely honest because like questions were like, have you ever thought about, just leaving him and walking out or leaving the house? And she's like, yeah. And here's the thing. Every mother and father have that thought, but there's only a certain subset of the population that will admit to having that thought. And this is what a lot of these questionnaires are based on.
A certain amount of the population that will act on that thought as well.
Exactly. So that's seen as a red flag, I suppose, in one of the questionnaires. And it's the same questionnaires for anxiety, depression, all that kind of stuff. And so Mel answered this questionnaire. And then the lady's like, oh, we need to, you need to be speaking to a doctor. And yes, started bringing up medication. And Mel just laughed and we walked out. But like, this is what happens. If someone is actually really honest and open, it puts up red flags on these really black and white check boxes that these doctors and people have. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, what do I do here? And then unfortunately, medication is the first thing that's thrown at people.
Well, we could almost do with a new... We could almost do with a new position now, which is like a medical advocate, kind of like a legal advocate or a subsection, because this is going on and because people feel like you're either dealing directly with the system or you're out of it. And you've either got to choose a camp, you've either got to be, oh, I'm very mainstream, so I need to listen to the letter, what my doctor says, or I'm not that and I've got to be alternative and I've got to get, practice, go to Qigong and get Chinese medicine, and I've got to either opt in or out. And I think there's a lot of areas like that you have got gaps for services. And so certainly medical lines, getting second opinions, and being able to say, okay, somebody who doesn't have any vested interest, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but I've seen some shocking programs about in America how pharmaceutical companies can actually incentivize their products for doctors.
Yeah,
which doesn't seem at all.
So they get a kickback, and the more you prescribe, the more
it's a very underhanded, because it's not overtly like, hey, here is X amount of dollars for this. It's like, well, the nice, good-looking sales rep for the pharmaceutical company will come by, take them out to very expensive dinners, wine and dine them, all these experiences, and be like, oh, by the way, it might be good for you to be moving a lot of this product. So it can be very underhanded. That being said, like any field, it's like therapists or plumbers or electrician, there's good and bad. But it scares the shit out of me, and I hate hearing that someone is just, without asking anything about all these external factors of your life, just goes, bang, here's medication.
Well, this is why I wanted to share the story, because I want listeners to understand that these doctors are meant to work for you. You're the one in charge here. They're meant to form part of your support network. I immediately asked him for information on the drug that he was trying to prescribe me. He couldn't provide it to me. So I went next door to the pharmacy and got them to provide some. And because I said to him, I don't want to take it because I want to feel what I'm feeling, and I don't want the side effects. He goes, no, there's no side effects with this one.
Oh, no.
I'm like, that's so much crap. So much crap. So I stood my ground and stayed in my power. And I said, no, you're wrong. So many people fall into the white coat syndrome, and just, because you got this bit of paper on the wall said you've studied and whatever, it doesn't mean he's an expert. So we do get to challenge, we do get to question, and I think we as a public need to take more ownership over our health and well-being.
Absolutely.
And start asking these questions and start challenging, start saying, oh, I disagree with you.
Well, you are the specialist of your own life. You're the only expert on exactly what's happening for you internally and externally. And so you really have to, create your own sounding board and understand that nobody knows exactly what's happening for you. And to a certain degree, we're all in a process of understanding ourselves.
Totally.
I wanted to bring up too, Nick, when you talked about, the depression, I'm not sure if you boys have read Lost Connections by Johann Hari. It's a great read. And he's a guy who's struggled with depression his whole life, and then delved into the medications and wanted to, and exactly what you're talking about, wanted to educate himself, wanted to become the expert. And what he found was, quite shocking. And I'm certainly not an expert to tell anybody what they should be doing, but I think it's a great book to listen to for those people who are perhaps dealing with anxiety and depression, but also for anybody who's wanting to understand how the system can kind of work, and you can get a bit lost in it, and you can not feel like you have those options that you exercise, Nick.
I highly recommend that.
We've spoken about Johann Hari before, his TED Talk, everything we think we know about addiction is wrong. And we're both big fans of his work. But I wanted to come back to something you said about an advocate. And the fact that we may potentially need an advocate for a healthcare system is a big red flag on its own. We need someone to help us. We need someone to help us get help. Like, fuck me, what a world we live in. But I've got a client at the moment who is actually creating a website and a portal and a whole business around this. So people go to her and say, this is what's going on. And so she's going to have a database of, holistic or integrated or whatever, or clinical, and so she's going to have this place where people can go and sort of like a menu and go, all right, well, this I'm going to try this and try this and try this. I'm not just going to go to one and subscribe wholly to what they're saying. I'm actually going to feel my way through this. And I think it's a great shift in the system, because so many people, as you said, get lost in it, feel very insecure, they feel inferior to the doctors. And I think anything we can do to help people to help themselves is very important.
Yeah, it's so true. Even the system is just set up in a way, like, if you look at it from an empathy point of view, even for the doctors, it's like, I've got 10 minutes to sit down with a person.
Oh yeah.
And
7 minutes.
7. And I feel like I need to deliver some sort of result in that 7 minutes. And if you're thinking about something as complex as, depression, anxiety, just stressful periods in people's lives, to think that, you actually can't possibly start to unravel that in 7 minutes. So it's like, well, I want this person to walk away with something. Well, I got this pill. So it's kind of, that's
the damned if they do, the damned if they don't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
a big focus of my work lately is, and it's up on the whiteboard, has been trying to teach people not to have an aversion to these unpleasant emotions or what we call in here suffering. So you've got mental health spectrum, you've got pleasant emotions, unpleasant, as we've spoken about, how there's no such thing as a good or bad or a positive or negative emotion. They're all equally as important. The pleasant ones are like happiness and joy and peace and calm. The unpleasant ones are anger, guilt, depression, anxiety. So it's funny prescribing or labeling or diagnosing someone with depression or anxiety, because every single person will experience it. But a question I've been asking clients lately is what you're experiencing a healthy emotional response? And it's catching so many people off guard. And they're like, oh, what do you mean? I'm feeling sad. I don't want to be feeling this way. I'm feeling angry. I shouldn't be feeling angry. I'm like, I get where you're coming from, but if someone's just done something, and we've spoken about it a lot before in the past, if you stub your toe, you're going to have a little bit of a flare up. If you then pick up whatever stubbed your toe and throw it through the window and then burn your house down, that's not a healthy emotional response that's in proportion to what you're experiencing. So we need to move away, I think, away from it's bad if I'm feeling anger or depression or anxiety, and understanding that, if you have a big fight with your partner, an appropriate response is to feel sad. If you go to the doctor and the doctor says, how are you feeling? You say sad. That doesn't mean you need to medicate that feeling, because it's important. It needs to come, but then it's going to go.
Yeah. I mean, imagine, Nick, if everyone was turning up and said, you said, what's happening? I feel completely numb. I don't feel any spectrum of emotions.
Well,
Well,
here's a
you
pill.
know, right? So you can feel something. That's
Yeah.
not what we want. We want to remain human. We want to remain in touch with our emotions. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Be a huge issue if we weren't.
absolutely. And I think interesting what you said there, Nick, because I believe actually we talk about depression. There can be a number of different reasons, for that, obviously. And one of them that we had spoken about for years is this grieving of a life that I feel like I should be living. Yeah. And then it was kind of interesting that I read it in many places, including Johann Hari's book Lost Connections, actually, that when doctors were first diagnosing depression, once again, it was this kind of checklist. And so if you check, 6 out of the 10 boxes or something, then you can say, yes, you've got depression. What treatment are we going to use? And then a lot of the clinicians were going back to the people who created the DSM, which is the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, list of mental illness, and said, look, we're getting a lot of people were a bit confused. So people who are going through grief, so they've lost someone close to them, they're coming in with the exact same symptoms as depression. And so the DSM looked at that, and so they changed the criteria to say, if you have been feeling any of the following for more than 2 weeks. So it's kind of like, your husband or wife dies. If you're not over it in fucking 2 weeks, you've got depression and we're going to treat you. But it was the exact same symptoms.
Can I get your thoughts on this, fellas? We talk about anger, guilt, depression, anxiety, and I'm saying to people, I don't think they're feelings. Anger is more a feeling of frustration, which we label as anger. Depression is feeling hopeless or helpless. Anxiety is living in fear. Guilt is sort of feeling ashamed or embarrassed. So I don't think those labels are really appropriate labels either. Like if the doctor said, "How are you feeling?" You said frustrated. You know, oh, okay. Well, what's going on with you? Why are you frustrated? Oh, well, because this isn't happening. Okay, so you're not getting what you want. We can start looking at distortions. But yeah, if you walk in there feeling, I'm just feeling a bit hopeless at the moment, just a bit helpless, a bit lost. I'm sort of, you know, just turning the wheels over, and then they're like, okay, so what are you doing
Yeah.
about it? We're very quick just to. What are your thoughts on that?
What do you think, Dan?
Well, certainly what I find, I like to personally take it back even a level further. Like what you're saying, we create these labels, and I guess this comes from a bit of a Buddhist meditation bent, where I like to go back to the sensations, because when you say, how are you feeling? And what you do when you ask the mind why, it is a meaning-making, answer-giving machine. That's what it does. So you ask it why, which isn't always the most pertinent thing to ask it. It'll start plucking from the environment. It'll say, why am I feeling bad? And it'll just say, here's everything you could be upset about right now. And then depending on what we feel most attuned to, we say, oh, that's what it is. Oh, that's what it could be. And we maybe weren't even thinking about any of those things. But when I say, how am I feeling? And perhaps, Nick, as you said, maybe there's what you might have said before, anger. And then you say, oh, wait a minute, what am I feeling? I'm feeling heat. I'm feeling constriction in my chest. I'm feeling a buzzing in my hands. I'm feeling a clenching. I'm feeling a racing heart. I'm feeling a contraction. And as soon as we start to do this, you're not trying to answer a why am I feeling this or exactly what as a label. It simply brings you back to this fundamental level where you can simply say, oh, these are the sensations that I'm having. And it's not necessarily that should be how you're constantly responding to the world. It's not like you can be in a meeting and something happened poorly and you just kind of blank out and you go into this kind of internal state where you're just touching on all your sensations. But if you are doing that in a practice, if you're doing it in a daily sit, or you're doing it having check-ins with yourself throughout the day, then it becomes more and more easy for you to just dwell in that place of I'm not labeling, I'm not creating judgments about my own feelings, but I'm simply aware of these sensations and I'm able to embrace them.
But I'm also not having an aversion to those sensations either, which so many people are creating. They don't want to feel these unpleasant sensations. So they determine that that is a problem, that I'm feeling this way. When, as I alluded to earlier, it could be, a racing heart could be a very appropriate emotional response
Hmm.
to whatever
Well, I had this
it is.
conversation with one of my with my dear fiance the other day, and I expressed that my understanding of you mentioned, Nick, suffering. Part of my understanding of suffering is just indicative of being a biological entity in a contingent world, meaning a changing world in which we have threats. Yeah, things can go wrong for us, things can go wrong in the world. And a lot of people feel like, oh, this kind of something's wrong. Some of what they talk about in anxiety and depression, there's something wrong that's happening. I'm threatened. I'm not fully secure. Where, of course, Buddhism teaches us everything's changing all the time.
But
Security is an illusion.
the source of a lot of that suffering is their attachments to thinking this should happen, which is a
Ah,
critical thinking error. So things aren't going wrong; things are just going as they go. And if a person has an attachment to wanting it or receiving or getting it, and they don't, then it becomes wrong. And so that's why
yeah,
we're calling
and
it
that
that
it's and that it's
unnecessary suffering.
yeah, and that it's natural. It's
Yeah.
natural to feel feelings. It's natural to have emotions, to respond to stimulus in our environment, and even just have a baseline feeling of I'm mortal. This being will die at some point. I am vulnerable. The whole stoicism,
Yeah,
thing
I was
of
dropping
like,
I was
mm,
dropping Em's daughter off at school this morning, 17-year-old, and yeah, we were talking about memento mori, and I was explaining to her, why it's important to meditate on our death, because so many people take the life for granted, or they live in fear of dying. So
yeah.
either you're not truly present to experience life as it
I
is.
was I was quite surprised because my parents are very open. They're very beautiful. I have a great relationship with both of them. And my mum, I definitely get, my philosophical and my psychological bent from both of them. And I said to my mum, who's very youthful and very vigorous and just retired at the age of 70. And I was talking about Stoicism with her, which she's always very interested, and she's an avid reader. She was an English literature teacher. And I told her, I've been meditating on my own death, and the fact this entity will come to an end. I said, she felt like, she said, oh, all these new chapters are happening in my life and I'm changing and all this. And I said, and this could be a practice, Mum, that you'd be interested in. And she said, maybe a bit later, you know. And I thought, oh, God bless you, so beautiful.
That is beautiful.
Here am I at 40 saying, good practice, really helpful for everybody. And Mum at 70 is,
7-year-olds like, maybe later.
Maybe later.
yeah, I'll get around to that at some point.
I just finished with a client before jumping on this, and she was speaking about feeling a bit flat, and it turns out she's out of balance. She's studying too much, and one of her tendencies is to get consumed by things. She loves to understand deeply to the nth degree, which can take her out of balance. And we started talking a bit philosophically, and I said to her, a gift I want to give myself, hopefully if I'm on a deathbed or if I'm present for the last minute of my life, is the gift of looking back without any regrets. And Has we did a whole podcast on it, but to look back and just go, yeah, I lived life on my terms and in the way that I wanted. I didn't let the world harden me. I didn't let people dictate me or create any uncertainty within myself. I lived by and large, on my terms and in my way, and that's a gift I want to give myself. And she's like, oh, wow, that sounds cool. Because it turns out she doesn't take herself out on any dates. She doesn't, she feels guilty about having me time. And I said, Ryan and I are big advocates of going bush for 3 or 4 days, just leaving everything behind, because it's a healthy practice. And then that, we can perhaps meditate on our death, or it's funny how many people think that that's a morbid thing to do. You think about your death. I'm like, no, I'm just thinking about my life and accepting that death is a part of that life. And they're like, yeah, you sound like a weirdo, man. So
it's the one certainty that we have in this life that's we're going to die, and so I think contemplating that's so important. And Michael Singer says we have an association that death's going to take something away, so it's going to take away my life when that time comes. But if you contemplate death, you realize death gives to you every single day, because if you know that you're going to die and it can happen at any time, then you can live life more fully. Because people talk, I hear like these scientists who are into longevity, and they're like, aging is something that we can avoid and we can live for hundreds of years. I'm like, fuck that. I'm really ready to go now. When the time comes, like, but being human,
if everyone goes, there's a fountain of youth, I'm turning left instead of right. I don't want to go near that thing.
Well, a great contemplation in movie form was The Fountain with Hugh Jackman years ago. I don't know if you guys saw that one.
Didn't see that one.
Great. Oh, yeah, it's called The Fountain. And his wife is, spoiler alert, his wife's dying of cancer. You find out.
I was going to watch it this afternoon, Dan.
Oh, no, just destroyed it, right?
I'm going to message Melissa. Take back The Fountain, the video shop.
Dan spoiled it. His wife is dying of cancer, and he's, of course, in the position, the uncomfortable position of doing research on cancer, how to cure cancer. And of course, his whole movement through the movie is coming to terms, or not coming to terms, either way he looks at it, with his wife's death, or imminent death. And the fact that he's racing to kind of find a cure. And he explicitly says in a few moments, like, death is a disease and we can cure it. And that's a great encapsulation of kind of the Western culture's viewpoint of,
it sounds like the ego
of death and medicine. Oh yeah, it's great. I mean, there's all this interweaving philosophy and all this other stuff. I think you'd really enjoy it, Nick. There's a lot to it.
I'm onto it now that I know the ending.
Did I say the ending?
He didn't say the ending. I'm on the edge of my seat.
No, it triggers people, death, because everyone is so afraid of it. And, here's one for you, Dan. You can go into, well, are we actually alive right now, or is death actually better than life, and who knows, and all that sort of shit. But
are we in a simulation?
Don't get me started, Ryan.
I want to start you.
It's on. It's on.
We've revved him up. Are we in a constant cycle of experiences that we call life and death and samsara and all that sort of stuff? So the reality is we don't know, but if we live in fear of losing everything that we have, we think we possess all this stuff. We think we've got this illusion of I own my home. It's such a weird thing for me to get my head around. I don't own my home. I can't.
But I have a bit of paper that says that this little bit of land is mine, and the structure that's on it is mine.
And I'm using this stuff called money that I don't actually own or have. The bank has it, but is it mine or theirs? And so,
that has no real value except the belief that the collective has in it.
It's so absurd. And Dan, I can see Dan wants to go. What do you got?
Well, of course, it all comes back to the appearance of the self, doesn't it? And I'm sure you've been delving into, Nick, the nature of the self. Through Buddhism or through Stoicism doesn't do it so much.
No.
But of course, even if you're not without going too far down the rabbit hole, even if you don't want to delve into, is this all an illusion? Simply the fact that where did the self and the appearance of your thoughts and your responses come from? Is the inherent Nick that you are now, was it there at birth? Or the fact that you've experienced all this conditioning and all the things that you've experienced through your life is creating conditioned responses. And what this does,
well, we talk to clients about that all the time, and it's what happens to us in childhood isn't our fault, but it is our responsibility to overcome it. So much of my work is literally unconditioning people and helping them. We separate who I am to how I operate, and so we don't want to change who you are. You're probably a very lovely person. If at the end of the day, all said and done, people would say, yeah, he's kind, caring, thoughtful, funny, considerate, blah blah blah. But how we operate tends to override that and doesn't allow our true, authentic self to be on display very much because we're so heightened. We're in such a state of neurosis that we're speaking from our emotions far too much. We're speaking from anger or guilt or anxiety or depression. So a big part of I feel what we could all do as a collective, individually and the bigger picture collective, is to stop and turn around and ask those questions to ourselves. Is this me? Is this authentic to who I am? What I am doing right now? Is this a conscious, considered, deliberate, mindful choice? Or is this just my autopilot, my patterns, my behaviors, and how's that working for me these days?
What if that decision to use make a mindful choice? What if that is an automatic reaction too? And do you believe in free will?
Oh, we're onto determinism and free will.
Dan!
Let's do this.
Oh, I'm gonna get some popcorn.
Goes in for it. Who is there to have free will, right?
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Right. So this is why I always come back to the appearance of the self, and which is the teaching of no self emptiness, which is absolutely not something that you just file away in your intellectual box and say, oh, I contemplated all that. Oh, I understand, independent arising and dependent arising. Yeah, I get all that. And I file it away neatly in my, I guess the self is not real. This is not how it works. So free will would start with the fact of who has free will. And when you look into the nature of self, I would say it's ultimately empty, which is pretty much, unfortunately parroting a Buddhist idea. But I would say that fundamental reality, Advaita Vedanta says, not two substances, one substance, not two. And this is talking about a unified field in which there is no difference between you or I, that everything is appearances. And this is what absolutely gets me going.
And no polarity in that field.
Yeah, there's no polarity. If you guys want a book to rock your socks off, it's from David Cass. Let me just make sure I've got the title right of this. It's just profound, and it's in the tradition of Ramana Maharishi and Nisargadatta Maharaj. And if those kind of big names scare you, this is the perfect book for you. It's called Perfect Brilliant Stillness.
Perfect Brilliant
Stillness. And this is just a down-to-earth guy who had this self-exploding experience. And it happens to people. And it's just amazing and it's profound. And if
I'm exercising free will, sorry to interrupt, Dan. I'm exercising free will, and I'm choosing not to go into that in this lifetime. I see all the masters and
the bodhisattva path.
Yeah, emptiness. I truly believe it all exists and everything, but I kind of like my life as it is. I like being connected. You look at the masters and everything, and the monks and all that. They don't have jobs and mortgages and partners and kids and all that sort of stuff. So they're so focused on being empty that and being nothing that
I personally don't think those things are mutually exclusive. And if you're interested in that book, he was a carpenter for 20 years, and then he had his experience, which is not an experience, to put it one way. And he went back to being a carpenter. He said this whole idea, who said you can't have an awakening experience and not work a job? Who said other people had to pay for you? Who said that anybody wants to hear this teaching anyway? It's a very contrarian attitude about it, and you might find it quite spicy. You might be able to get your teeth
spicy
into it.
enchilada.
You might enjoy it. You might be able to savor this.
I
not going
love
off
anything
into
that
a
piques my
cave.
interest and that stimulates my mind, and I love listening to Ram Dass and just sitting there with an open mind, and I've got no idea if what he's talking about is true or not true or exists or doesn't exist or anything, but I love entertaining all of this stuff, and it does resonate, and I guess what I'm saying is I'm not in a rush to go down that path. I'm just,
all power to you. Nobody said you have to do anything.
No, they didn't. Nature never
nothing.
rushes yet everything is accomplished. So
absolutely. So I think it's very easy to go down these routes and feel like you have to become evangelistic. In fact, it's a psychological effect that I've heard, and it's one of the reasons why you shouldn't. Your friends lost lots of weight and they've gone on a specific diet and all of this sort of stuff, and of course they will tell you that this diet changed their life, and that's wonderful. But that doesn't mean that what they did was right for you. And so we often feel that our own experiences that it imbues us with this feeling of that we have a little bit of truth, that we've cornered some truth that's got to be true for everybody else.
It's a subjective truth that we can fall into the trap of claiming as objective truth.
Absolutely. And so that's why it's important too that all of these things about freedom of speech and the right to be who you are and experience things as you want. There is nothing wrong with disagreeing and having different views. In fact, it makes it such a beautiful world, and it's so important to enjoy everybody else's views.
It's one of my favorite quotes by Voltaire. He says, I disagree wholeheartedly with what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. And that's where we've fallen into the trap in this social media world where, we feel like if I disagree with someone, then they're not in my tribe, or I'll hate that person because I don't agree. And it's like, I disagree with a bunch of my friends about different stuff, but we still love each other. And I wish more of the world could understand that. But unfortunately,
it's very healthy.
A lot of algorithms.
Well, for me, it just comes down to respect. Get the ego will come out and say, no, I'm right and you're wrong. It goes into that binary thinking, where I think if we can surrender the ego a bit more and just okay, I respect that you're a person, you have views and thoughts and opinions and a mind, and that's great, and in fact it's a healthy for us all to have so much diversity. I don't want to live in a world where there's 7 billion Nicks. I'd fucking go mad.
So I
has just thought about that.
I'd have 7 billion people who beat me at fucking golf. It'd be terrible. Wouldn't be able to win against anyone.
Well, it all comes down to these paradigms that work well up to a certain point, but we have to be aware that there are constructs. These materialistic constructs which say, if you want to get a deal for somebody to manufacture your product or to give you investment backing, then you need to be saying this is the best possible thing, that they could possibly back. And so it drives some of those polarized and, those opinions that it's got to be, the best or it's the worst, or this has to win over this. And so we get stuck in that way of thinking, and we forget, of course, there's nuance. Of course, there's mystery.
That's where we get out of that binary thinking into spectrum thinking, and the things are just different. There's no
Yes.
good or bad or right or wrong or better or worse. Things are just different. And this will do that, and this will do that. So if we can sit in that mind space, it's just so much, life's so much
Mm,
easier. And I'm really attracted to simplicity.
Mm.
I'm really
mm,
attracted to, talk to clients about how I'm not trying to help clients reach enlightenment. I'm just trying to reduce unnecessary suffering. And all we're using, like Buddhism, you can dive so deeply into that rabbit hole. All I'm using is two philosophies: that
mm-hmm,
the source of all suffering is attachment and ignorance, and that the law of nature is that everything's impermanent. And just from those two very simple truths, so much can come from them, and make people's lives, or help people to live um, a much more liberated life.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
simple's better.
Absolutely.
So things are complex enough as it is. I think simple's much better.
Mm.
I like to look at other
You might.
people and have the phrase in my mind, that's simply me living a different life. I've got
Mm,
the belief that, we're all tiny fractions of the universal consciousness or God or whatever you want to call it, that we're all
mm,
single droplets out of the one ocean. So whenever I'm
mm,
feeling like I want to fight back at someone who disagrees with me, I've just got to say, that's just me. Like I could be looking in the mirror, we're all brothers and sisters on
mm.
this journey.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well said. And when you were talking, Nick, before about simplicity and just being open in your thinking, you might like. There's a book from Stephen Batchelor called, I think it's called the Faith to Doubt, and it's about how we really try to. The mind tries to take out all doubt. Doubts about things is seen as the enemy, whereas doubting things or having an open mind and not feeling like you're under threat by ideas other than your own is a very nice kind of open way, and you can bring it. It's a san, which is Korean Zen Buddhism. It's a practice which they use these terms that are kind of like koans in Zen. They're called wadu, and they have you doubting things, like just asking open questions like what is this? What is this that I'm experiencing? But you're trying to answer, ask those in an open state where you're not looking for an answer. You're looking for openness in your
It's like
in
the
your
And
what is the
keeps you,
sound
it
of one
keeps you.
hand clapping? That kind of question.
exactly.
Always reminds me of
So,
Bart Simpson going.
Yeah, yeah.
a practice I started ages ago, and now has become ingrained, I suppose, or I've conditioned myself with, is just to wake up and think. My first thought for the day, now it's an unconscious process, but is, I wonder what today will bring. And so
Mm,
that immediately opens my mind. And the spaces I've been into, with my mental health, and mental illness, I now understand the nature of my mind, and I understand what works for me and what doesn't work for me. Like my client earlier today, my mind has a tendency, it's within my nature to go very deeply into things. So balance for me is a word that I keep pinned up in my mind. I need to temper my, you know double-edged swords. My superpower becomes my Achilles heel. So
mm-hmm,
I love the philosophy. I love absorbing all that stuff. But if I go too deeply into it, um, I go past a healthy point, then it becomes consuming, then I'm out of balance. So everything for
mm-hmm,
me just comes back to being in balance and keeping things simple, and just keeping
mm-hmm.
my mind open, and I love bathing in the fact that I am ignorant, I am incompetent, I am mediocre to some degree, and that keeps my ego in check, and
Mm-hmm.
Bathing in our
that but
mediocrity.
yeah, but we are, and so that system works for me, and that I've developed that system, I guess, the way of living
Mm,
through trial and error, and
It also
mm,
um,
relates back to what Dan was saying earlier. Like I love that as well. I love that phrase. You've mentioned it before on the show. Like I wonder what today will bring, because that's so opening. And a lot of people wake up in the morning with the idea. And Dan was talking earlier about how our mind is answering questions. Yeah, and it's trying to work out what's important. And the reticular activating system part of our brain is what filters out most information based on the questions we ask. So when people wake up in the morning and go, what's going to go wrong today? The brain goes, we're looking for what's wrong today. Okay. and guess what? It will find what's wrong, because there's just as much going wrong as is going right. But if I'm looking for what's wrong, my brain will find that for me. And then it becomes a self-perpetuating cycle, because I'm like, what's going to go wrong today? Then the brain shows you 10 things and you're like, I knew it, things were going to go wrong. And then we start the next day the same, instead of saying something so opening like Nick and just saying, I wonder what today will bring. It's curious.
But it's not even looking for what's right or wrong. It's, you go back to Buddhism, it's the attachments. I have a desire for this to happen. If that doesn't happen, then I determine that is wrong, and then I'm going to go into suffering and have an adult tantrum, and then I'm going to project that onto people around me. And so, yeah, it's more a case of, once again, it always comes back to my life's not perfect. Things aren't going my way. I'm outsourcing my happiness. I'm getting, basically people are waking up going, right, I hope today I get what I want and everything goes my way, and I got that getting what I want happy, instead of just being inherently happy, and just allowing people to be, and allowing the world to be, and allow the ebb and flow of the universe to occur, and just sitting in wonderment and looking at it and just appreciating the beauty of it all, and going, this is so cool. Look at that happening. Look at that happening. And just fucking John Lennon, let it be.
Well, that's awesome. Conditional happiness, isn't it? As opposed to unconditional. There's a saying that says anything that happens for a reason won't stay, because the reason won't stay. It's like Jesus said, the peace that passeth all understanding was just the peace that arisen. There was nothing that happened that caused peace. Peace was just oozing out of him. And that's the same, like I'm unconditionally going to accept what's happening, instead of saying, well, these 10 things need to happen and these 10 things don't need to happen, and then I'll be okay, because we'll never be okay for long.
Well, we got t-shirts.
You guys
printed
are
up
spilling some wisdom.
You kicked us off, Dan. You started going. You went hard. We're just trying to keep up.
We got some t-shirts made up for work, and on the back of it says "unreasonably happy since 2009."
That's awesome.
And it confuses the fuck out of people, because they're like, "What do you mean?" And they don't understand that I'm quite a literal fellow, and it means there's literally no reason for my happiness. It's just I'm choosing to be happy, and things will come, and things will go, and things will stay, and things will change, and it's all good.
It's kind of reminds me. I get like the picture, where someone is just unreasonably happy, and then other people who obviously aren't are like, "What are you so happy for?" Yeah, and it's like there's got to be a reason. They want to know. Maybe they want it for themselves. Like, why are you so happy? And it's good to just be able to go, there's no reason. Like me and Mel say to each other all the time. You know how people like partners will say, "I love you because." Like we just love saying, "Babe, I love you for no reason."
Yeah. Yeah. I guess what I'm actually saying is I'm just content. I'm content with the fact that I'm ignorant, incompetent, and mediocre. I'm content with the fact that things won't always go my way. I'm content with I won't always get what I want. I'm content in the understanding the nature of who I am, and I have my strengths and my weaknesses, my flaws. Are very evident, but I don't sit in judgment of myself and determine that I'm a good or a bad person, or what I'm doing is right or wrong. I just, I love the expression that understanding is the cornerstone to love. And so, I understand my nature, and I'm wholeheartedly accepting of that. And I love myself unconditionally, and I'm very content with who I am. But I also realize that as a part of nature, I am also going to grow. It's just a
I'm
given.
sorry. I had the visual of you just saying what you said, that whole thing to the doctor, and then he's like, "Just take these fucking pills, mate. Can you go away?"
Surprised he wouldn't call for a straitjacket. This guy's in neurosis, and what you were saying before about people who can't understand you're happy. It's like people who can't hear the music and see you dance think that you're mad. People don't understand it. We can be so easily happy when we just let go and surrender, and just stop trying to control things out of this anxiety.
Dan, I have a question for you. what you're obviously a very deep thinker and, you know, well read, and there's Buddhism, Stoicism, and many more things as well. What started you down that path?
This is Dan's
Yeah,
question.
This is Dan's question.
very,
I know all about you, Nick, so shut up for a minute.
very interesting that you asked that. There is something in that book I told you about, and you kind of brought up the simulation. I spoke about David Cass, and he talks about the matrix, which at one point Morpheus says it's like a splinter in your mind, you know, that you can't get out, that there is something about reality that seems like there's more to it than what is just appearing. And I guess that's the closest way I can maybe explain that from a very young age. And my dad said to me, I don't really know where you get this from. None of us are really like that, which I would call him, frankly, because he took some philosophy, and Mum's definitely into it as well. But there is something, there was a feeling from early on, very early on, that there was more to reality than what I was seeing. And that led me from a very early age. I remember, you know, it kind of started with those fantastic Chinese martial arts movies when you're very young, and you see the white-haired, the white-bearded, you know, the Taoist sage characters who are, you know, in the forest meditating. And I just remember being like, what is that? And my mum kind of came into my room, and I'd be sitting cross-legged on the floor, and she'd say, what are you doing? I said, I'm meditating. You know, and she kind of
how old would
back.
you say? How old roughly?
I think I started watching those movies before I was 10.
Wow.
You know, because they're not
cool.
not that violent, you know, and she kind of reports back to me, I thought you were just messing around. You know what I mean? and it took a while. You know, I did my first, so I was mucking around like that since that kind of a young age. And I remember asking those difficult questions. My family was Christian, but very not, you know, church going, not fundamental or very strict at all. And I remember the priest being very, very nice guy, you know, but me asking very pointed questions and just feeling like that doesn't answer anything.
That doesn't add up.
That doesn't add up. And so it very much led me on this path where one of my good friends who was, I did theatre from a young age, which is a very interesting exploration into the nature of self, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
If you're inheriting different characters, and how we're these composites, we're these constructs in a way. But he gave me, I actually found this book just the other day in a box, because I was going through a box of old books, and I found it that he gave to me. The Celestine Prophecy. I don't know if you guys
remember. I know that one. Yep.
Right? Remember that from way back?
Mm-hmm.
And so I must have got that when I was about 13, 14, and that started me on the reading train of, oh, okay, there's all this stuff. I'm not getting answers from anybody in my community. Nobody seems to know what I'm talking about. And although I felt like, oh, the martial arts movie, and I was not sure, okay, I'm sitting. So what's this meditation thing about? What am I supposed to be doing? And then, you know, I got Zen Mind, Beginner Mind. There was all that, and that started that whole exploration. And I was very lucky I went to the Theosophical bookstore. So fast forward some years, and I tried to go to some kind of evening meditation classes, and that didn't really seem to stick much. I tried the martial arts too, because I thought that was a bit of an aspect. But I love people too much. I don't like, you know.
I wanted to be a ninja.
Yeah. Oh, don't we all? You know, very cool. But then you remember American Ninja, and they do stuff like this, and then they disappear into the background. he possessed great skills. You remember this? It's great. I loved all those. I loved all that, but I still didn't really feel like I was getting it. And I went into the Theosophical bookstore. I think I must have been 17, 18. Is it still there in near Flinders Street? Flinders Street Station. It was just around the corner from there.
I'm not
there
sure.
in Melbourne.
I haven't bumped into it.
And I just found the right clerk because I was wandering around. I was like, wow, there's so many books, and they're all about meditation and kind of anything from really traditional old school through to like new agey sort of stuff. And I turned to one of the guys and I said, what's a great book on just the truth, the fundamental truth behind everything, you know? And I was just like, I think I was intense. I was just intense. Like I was like, tell me, I need to know, you know? And he kind of looked at me. I think, you know, kind of got this glint in his eye. It's like, right, yeah, okay. I can feel you, bro. I feel you. And he kind of led me down and he said, a lot of people been reading this one for a long time. I reckon this guy's legit. This guy's for real. And that was I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj, which he actually died the year I was born. So, you know, that had been around for a while. And his tradition, you know, I would say that any true master is beyond tradition, but his tradition was Advaita Vedanta, which is non-dualism, which is what I said to you, Advaita Vedanta, not to one, not two, which is a funny way of putting it, but we could go into that later. So I guess I'm answering your original question, and then I hit, I guess, a point. One of my big shifts was going and doing an SN Goenka 9-day retreat. I guess it's 10 days, 9 days of sitting, Vipassana meditation. And I would still recommend, I would be conscious who I recommend it to. I would say if this sounds like something you would like to do, because it requires 9 days of silence, you know, and they have some ticking boxes of how do you feel about doing this, and you know, so you need to check in with yourself. We're all mature.
Not everyone's cup of tea.
Not everybody's cup of tea, exactly. And you've got to find your own way. But as far as a fundamental sitting practice, that's a great kick you in the butt.
And that's what we teach here. And for me, that was the final piece of my jigsaw puzzle. Everything sort of just fell into place after that 10 days for me too. And it was, yeah. I recommend it to everybody though, because I just love seeing how people encounter and experience it. And some pull the pin a couple of days in, but I love that. I'm like, okay, what happened?
Well, I guess, I guess we're all robust, and we can. I've just heard people talk about it in a, you know, that they kind of didn't recover from the experience, and so that's why I try to qualify it a bit. Just that it kind of, that it shocked them, kind of to be in touch with themselves in that way.
I think it's with any intense experience, you know, if someone hasn't laid some, it doesn't have to be strong, but some foundations, like it's people to, you know, now going and, you know, because it's trendy to go and do ayahuasca or psilocybin and that kind of thing. If people do it and they've got a lot of trauma and haven't got any foundations and done any, you know, grounding work, then they can find themselves in trouble. And I imagine a Vipassana could possibly be a similar experience.
I would say I would equate looking for those experiences with psychedelics as a similar, you're looking for something that you could look down the meditation train, or you could go down the kind of psilocybin route or those sort of other traditions. But that certainly I don't know about much of the traditions behind those. But one thing I will say about the meditation traditions is that they're ideally, you're held in a very supportive environment where you're told to be non-reactive to the stimulus that's coming up. You're taught to be equanimous, and that
there's a discourse at the end of every day,
and that not all of the time, but to a certain extent, in my own experience, you are ready to experience the experiences by the time you get there. You're not, you're not letting off a fire hose of kind of psychedelics that just kind of like blast this whole thing on your mind, right? That you weren't ready for it. But everybody has their own.
Everyone's got their own path. Yeah. One of the reasons I got you to sort of describe kind of your path a bit there, and I'll get your recommendation. But I think a lot of people listening to the show are kind of in the process of making a shift in their life. They're starting to think differently. They're starting to feel differently. They're starting to show up differently in their life. They're starting to take the keys to their happiness back. And a lot of them are starting to look at like, what directions do I want to be? What do I want to be researching or reading, or what paths do I want to be going down? So I always like to get some sort of recommendation. You might have mentioned it already because you've mentioned quite a few books, but is there any books or reading material or any resources that you think would be helpful for someone who's maybe just starting out on the path?
You're the clerk in the Theosophical bookstore now.
And I'm the little 14-year-old going, I want the truth, the ultimate.
Give it to me. Between their eyes.
I thought you were going to say like he led you through a secret passageway and down a hallway.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
Under candlelight, the Holy Grail or something. Come here, my child.
Like in the case,
Indiana Jones going down there.
Yeah, totally. Love it.
The book has to choose you.
Oh, nice. It's like the Sorting Hat of Harry Potter. Fantastic. There is, absolutely. I have many books that I recommend. I would say if you have an interest in, Nick said he responded to Vipassana. I certainly had a good experience with it. If you feel a resonance with Buddhism, I would start off with The Science of Enlightenment by Shinzen Young. It's a great foundation. It explains Buddhism, is a Western Zen Buddhist, so he understands the Western mind, which certainly makes sense to me. He was a practicing scientist, so he's very clinical in his thinking, and it gives you a great basis to what is, and he teaches it, even though he's Zen, he teaches Vipassana as his beginning tool. That is a great program. You can get it as a written book, or you can get it as an audio program if you're more into the audiobooks. I would say if you have less of a draw towards a sitting practice and more of an embodied practice, and are exploring different new options that are not necessarily part of an ancient tradition. Perhaps you've had experiences with the religions, perhaps they rub you up the wrong way. This sense of God or framing doesn't work for you. An embodied way of coming at the practice, I would suggest Radical Wholeness by Philip Shepherd, who's and he's a mixed bag of all kinds of stuff, and he's looked at all kinds of traditions and then kind of come to a really embodied presence approach that is him, similar to Nick, it's him building an approach based on his experiences. So it's only him talking about what he has found and what has worked for him. And I would say that is a really good place to start for an embodied practice. And the book that I read, if you're into, Nisargadatta Maharaj said, I take my final stance where I do not even know I exist. Now, there's a bit to unpack in that statement. If you are into, for lack of a better word, because all words are metaphors, no words are absolutely truth. And, the classic Zen statement or Taoist statement of do not be fixated on the finger that points to the moon. Yeah, it's the moon we're talking about, not the finger. So don't get messed up with the language. But if you're into no self, transcendent, that kind of what I spoke about when I was like, give me the truth. If that's kind of where you're kind of at, and you have that kind of yearning, then I would recommend to most Western readers the book that I said from David Cass, which is The Perfect Brilliant Stillness, as a perfect place to start. He recommends all kinds of other authors on that topic, so you can find a whole and get your teeth into it there. And
Excellent.
for me, what was my fundamental, where I started, was the I am that from Nisargadatta Maharaj. But I would say that has more barriers to entry than the Perfect Brilliant Stillness. You should be able to understand what he's saying straight off the bat. You can get it in a book. You can get it in an audio format once again.
Fantastic.
I told you, didn't I, Hass? I told you.
Yeah, we have to organise a part 2.
Part 2. We've been going on a little while.
I know that's not the fastest hour and 20 ever. But
I'm thinking we need to organise like a monthly. Each bring a bottle of wine, sit down.
Now we're talking. Now we're talking.
We've got 2 hours of.
We'll bring our antidepressants and we'll go for it.
You get to bring one philosophy each to the table, and then we have to sit there and unpack it.
Let us know, listeners, if that's going to be good. But I know that I've had a bloody great time talking with you, Dan, and I'm so happy to have met you today. Another like-minded soul on the journey. Fantastic, mate, and it's great to be able to connect, even though we're from the same homeland. We're on opposite sides of the world. And thanks, Nick, for the intro. Yeah. And listeners, you'll be hearing from Dan again, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Just to finish, I think. You know the expression, you can't have your cake and eat it too? I don't think that's true, because how else are you meant to eat your cake? How else are you meant to eat your cake if you don't actually have it?
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave you boys with that one. Figure that one out.
I'm going to eat a lot of cake this Savo, just so I can really think about
that. I'm going to research thoroughly.
I got over 3 cakes. Mel's like, what are you doing? I'm like, philosophy. I'm thinking, all right.
I'm really delving into the experience Nick was talking about. So true.
Thank you all for listening. We love you all. We'll see you all next week. Peace out.
Peace.
Yeah. Love